It's Attribution Nation time, where we look at attribution from multiple angles in a unique mini-series format. Our first 5 episodes are all about attribution history. Let's go! Welcome to our 5th and final episode of Attribution Nation in terms of the mini-series format that we're doing here. So this is the final episode of our mini-series where we talk about the history of attribution and kind of like where it all came from. And I am joined today by Andrea Lechner-Becker. She's a former CMO, and she helps to write and produce Attribution Nation. And she's also just generally interested in attribution. She and I talk about it a lot, and she's also been one of my mentors. So Andrea is joining today, and we're going to talk about kind of like what our key learnings were from this first mini-series, what are some of the key takeaways, and just generally kind of close out the mini-series. So Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I've enjoyed watching it and listening to it from the sidelines, so I'm excited to do this wrap up with you.
Awesome.
All right, so I'm gonna give you my main takeaways, Drew, and you can add on to them as you see fit. So the first thing that struck me is that every single one of these guys, which I can say guys because they are all men that we had on the show. So all of these guys, almost immediately, within the first 10 minutes of every single episode, they talk about how attribution is not a credit game. And meanwhile, at like every company that I have consulted, and I feel like maybe you've consulted too, but you tell me, it turns into a credit game so quickly. So how did all of these founders and CEOs of these companies create these products and have no intention for it to boil down to marketers taking it into an executive meeting and using it to fight for budget and argue against sales for all of these things and everything to turn into, well, that data is not exactly right and blah, 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 like all of the conversations that we know end up happening with attribution software that make everybody go, attribution software sucks, right? Like you're not even ever supposed to be using it that way. So like, if they don't think that it should ever be used for credit, how did we get here? What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a takeaway for me as well. I noticed the same thing. And this goes against every principle that we teach at Attribution to our customers. I even created a meme about this, that you shouldn't be doing the credit game. And I think the problem comes down to a couple of things. Number one, CFOs getting more and more involved in the marketing budgeting process and wanting to know where the money's going and what ROI they're getting out of it. I think that there's another piece of the puzzle is, the average tenure for a CMO keeps going down and down and down and down. And CMOs are under more and more pressure to perform. And in some cases are getting less and less resources to do it with. And so they're scrambling to show the value of what they're doing to, one, try to get more resources, and two, try to protect their jobs because people are gunning for CMOs. CMOs are under a lot of pressure. And so I think that those two things are the first things that come to my mind when I think of why are we getting into this credit game, which is absolutely not the intention of attribution.
Yeah, and I think that the learning there is so many of these episodes feature these founders and CEOs saying how they want you to use these products, right? Like they want you to use them to as one data point on the larger scheme of like answering the question, what's working and what's not. That's fundamentally the question every marketing department has to be charged with, but it's very obvious from listening to every single one of them over and over and over. It was, this isn't your Bible on what's working and what's not. It is a data point that you need to combine with other things. And those answers, what additional things you need to combine them with, that differed here and there between the guys. But ultimately, I thought that was like the main takeaway was like, stop using it as credit. That was never the intention. Don't go into meetings and try to do it like that. You have to use it as a data point.
Yeah. And it's because part of the problem, though, is that when you go into a meeting and you're approaching from a credit standpoint as a CMO or a VP of demand gen or whatever, and you're in a meeting with other departments, like particularly sales, and you come in and you start talking about how marketing is taking credit for all this stuff, the first thing sales is going to do is say, no, that's BS. No, like you didn't sell it. So no. And it just starts creating this competitive nature between marketing and sales. It shouldn't be there. Like it shouldn't be competitive between marketing and sales. It should be collaborative. Like we all know, particularly in the B2B game, like we all know that for the vast majority of B2B, there's no such thing as selling a deal without sales. So for marketing to be trying to claim sales, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And I thought Eric had really good insights here because Eric is an ex-CEO of a company that he founded and then moved into a sales function in a lot of organizations, was promoted at Caliber Mind from sales into the CEO position. And even as a seller, he mentioned you need to incorporate all of those touch points in addition to all of the marketing touch points in your larger story of where are your best deals coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, which is true. I mean, you do. If you aren't including that, you are missing a big part of the funnel and a part of the journey.
Yeah. And speaking of including data points, my takeaway too is like data, man, it's a problem, right? Speaking again about Eric, he explained that when he had joined the company originally as a salesperson, a lot of what the engineers who were building Caliber Mind thought, and I thought this was like adorable and very cute. He said that a lot of them were like, oh, we'll just take all of this marketing data, we'll just run some machine learning algorithms on it, and then bada bing, bada boom, insights, right? Like,
yeah.
I like as a marketer, I was like, oh my God, that's so cute. That's so cute, you little engineers, right? And then they realize like, oh shit, no, it's not so easy, right? Like for a myriad of reasons that Eric goes into in your interview with him. And so B2B marketing data is being, and will always be a mess? Or do we think there's some hope here with these tools and other things that you're seeing in the market?
I think there's hope, but there has to be a fundamental shift in the attitude towards data within marketing departments, because what we find a lot of is marketing departments don't care about the data. They don't pay attention to the data until they have a report due to the board on Monday and it's Wednesday. And then they start scrambling, and then they care about the data a lot, but you've spent years neglecting it. It's the old adage of waiting for the roof to start leaking in the middle of a hurricane before you actually do any kind of preventive maintenance on the roof. You just leave it alone for years, and then the hurricane hits and you get massive leaks, and you're like, well, why are there these leaks? And it's like, well, because you didn't maintain the thing, right? So I think that marketers have to get away from this mindset that they've had for a long time of just letting the data do its thing and then hoping that it'll be okay when it comes time to create that deck and those reports for the board. Because that's not how data works. Data doesn't work that way. There's this, and I know, Andrea, you've heard me use weird, crazy analogies before, so I'm gonna bring one to the conversation here now. There's this weird, so everybody knows back in the days when you had like cords and cables for your headphones, everybody knew that no matter how nice and neat you package them up to put them in your backpack or your bag to bring them wherever you're bringing them, they'd always end up in a knot, right? They'd always end up all tangled. Well, there's a legit theory called knot theory that explains why this happens. And the reason it happens is because there's nearly an infinite number of ways that your headphone cords and cables can get tangled in knots, but only like 2 or 3 ways that they cannot get tangled in knots. So as your bag bounces around and jumbles around in the car, when you're picking it up and carrying it and walking, the cables all move around, but as soon as they get outside of those 2 or 3 ways where they're not in a knot, it's guaranteed they're getting into a knot. That's data. It's not theory, it applies to data. There's only 2 or 3 ways that you can engineer data to be clean. I mean, there's more than that, but for the sake of this analogy, there is an infinite number of ways that data can go wrong, right? Infinite. Infinite plus infinite. So if you just assume that data is going to be fine, it's not, because it's going to get into those infinite categories of how it can get out of alignment.
Okay, so companies are not investing enough in data. specifically B2B companies, are not investing enough in data. This has been a problem I started consulting in 2011. Ain't nobody doing it then. People aren't doing it now. So how do we really start to turn the tide? Like, how can people convince CFOs, CEOs, people that really control the budgets to really start investing in data? How can we do this?
I think there's two primary ways. Number one is you have to show them the cost of having bad data. Obviously, when it comes to CFOs and CEOs, everything comes down to money, right? So if you show the cost of having bad data in terms of man hours, of manually stitching together data sets, manually cleaning data, manually merging duplicate records, things like that, if you show the actual hard costs related to bad data, then obviously that's one way to get their attention. Another way to get their attention comes down to money again. And if you can show the value of things like attribution, where you can identify and reduce wasted marketing spend by having good, clean, actionable marketing data, then that tends to get the attention of CFOs and CEOs. As the old saying goes, every marketer knows that 50% of their money is wasted. They just don't know which 50%. So if you can actually start identifying that 50% and show that to the CEO and CFO that, hey, we can identify where we're wasting our money, stop wasting it there and move it to the places where it's getting traction and actually adding value, then you should be able to get the attention of the CEO and the CFO to invest in this stuff, right? I mean, if you can show cost savings and ROI benefit, that's typically the best way to get attention from a CEO and CFO.
Yeah, so I think what I heard is, one, track every wasted piece of energy and work that you have to do in order to get to an end result of a report, so that you can show in hard numbers just how much time and therefore money the organization is wasting on not having solutions like this. And then I think that the other step to building that business case is, I think stories like are being shared on these episodes with these men. Keep in mind, like, all these people are CEOs, so they also have marketing budgets. And so it's really interesting to hear from them, especially I loved how Aaron and Lars talked about this. Aaron talked a lot about how he thinks about investing in go-to-market strategies when he was at Visible, and he aligns it a lot to the way that Warren Buffett's advice tells you to invest in the market. So I think those two things are absolutely critical. And I think in general, a lot of marketers, especially junior marketers who are trying to get technologies like attribution or anything, are really, nobody teaches you how to build a business case fundamentally in college. It would be a great course or class or seminar or something.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think those are the two things that you can be doing very actionably right now to make the case to invest in better data.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to, using the example of, we've got to get these reports and this deck over to the board on Monday, and it's Wednesday when we start caring about this. If you have to have your entire team work over the weekend, and you've got 3 people spending their entire weekend putting this together, and you quantify that as, hey, hourly rates and weekend work and 3 people, and you say, hey, this cost us $15,000 to put this together, somebody's going to say there's got to be an easier way.
That's another great point. Make it their idea. Be like, look at how much this took. And hopefully they're not like, well, you're fired. Maybe control the conversation a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
All right. I love that. And then speaking of action, right? I thought it was really interesting talking to Aaron Bird in particular, because he was the CEO of Visible. He got acquired by Marketo, which then subsequently got acquired by Adobe. And now he owns a company and it's Inflection.io is the company that he owns. And essentially their focus is helping PLG companies convert better. PLG is product-led growth. Those kinds of companies are very focused on conversion after the initial point, right? You get your free trial subscriber for $0, and then you want to try to convert them into a paying subscriber. You want to try to convert the company into paying for multiple seats, blah, 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 blah. And he spoke about how he started Inflection because he always felt like the missing piece with Visible was, okay, we're giving you these insights, but then how do you action on them? And Lars, the CEO of Dream Data, said a similar thing where they started with kind of a BI kind of solution, right? Like business intelligence, we're going to tell you what's working, what's not. And now they're really more focused on using things like the conversion API for LinkedIn and Google Ads and all of those technologies so that they can piggyback on. And let me explain that for a hot second for anybody who hasn't listened to that episode. The conversion API basically brings all of this data that is in your in-house systems, like your marketing automation platform or your CRM, like Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, all of those technologies. It takes that and puts it back into these ad platforms so that you can tell the ad platform, hey, this person, go track where this person came from, the ads that they were responding to, the keywords that I was using, the creative that I was using, and give more people that look like that because they're high converting, AKA they actually paid us money and got into pipeline for us. Give me more people like that. I want to use your AI engine to help power those kinds of insights. And I think that's where it seems like this all is moving. So all of that to say, to me, it feels like from looking at this space for over a decade, there were all of these action tools, all of these marketing automation, or back in the day, ESPs that were looking to send something to the consumer and report back on what they found. And marketing attribution tools were saying, okay, I'm going to take that data and help you gain insights to it. It almost feels like it's reversing the entire script where attribution tools are saying you should always be taking insights and then actioning on them. So it almost feels to me where the market is going is attribution tools want to be the hub of what should you be doing, and then even taking, in the case of Inflection, some of those action and even Dream Data, right? Like taking some of those actions into that platform so that it's not, I don't know what the way to describe that is. Like it's not top led, it's bottom. I feel like there's got to be a something there, but that's what I kind of took away in a very rambly way. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we've always seen with attribution platforms is when we get somebody onto an attribution platform, suddenly they have all this great data. And the answer is, and the question that we get is, great, now that I have all this data, what now?
What do I do with it? Yeah.
What do I do with it? Great. Well, that's the question. So the answer is, well, first off, you have to take that data and you have to turn it into insights. And then an insight's great. Congratulations, you found that insight. But in order to turn that insight into something that increases revenue or decreases spend or whatever, you have to take an action based on that insight. And what we found is that process of going from data to insight to action right now is super, super manual. You have to use human people to actually do that. And what we know is that anytime there's a large amount of human intervention required for an action to happen, it is far down the list of things that are actually going to take place. The more human intervention is required for something, the less likely it is to get done, period. Plus, the more fraught with potential human errors it's going to be as well. So instead of having all of this human intervention to go from data to insights to action, you are automating a lot of that as much as possible. The other thing that I think that solves two key problems. Number one is the resource gap, that marketing teams don't have the resources to invest in humans to do that analysis, to go from data to insight to action. Number two, there is a skills gap in marketing. And that skills gap is related to marketers being data savvy. And I'm saying this not to harp on anybody that's a marketer, but Andrea, you actually are really good at marketing data analysis, but it's something that you've practiced over the years. What did you study in college?
Marketing and art.
Marketing and art. Before you started doing analysis the way that you did it, when was the last time you did any kind of statistical math work?
Well, so I have an interesting answer to this concept because I had, right before I became a consultant, I was on a team called Business Intelligence at a huge telecommunications company. And I was the only person on that team of 5, I think we were, that did not have a master's of mathematics. So they all were doing all of this deep statistical work. They were querying SQL databases in order to get the exact correct data. They were very, very knowledgeable. And I was the translation layer between, frankly, they were too dorky to talk to the marketers, because the marketer, it was like engineers and marketing people try to talk to each other, and the engineer would like, engineers have a different language and different personalities and than marketers, traditionally, stereotypically. Okay. And it was the same thing for like these math geniuses and marketers. And so my whole job was the translation layer between the two of them, where I was like, okay, but like, what does that, okay, yeah, like the regression analysis, I got it. But like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, explain it to me in an easier to digest way. And then I would go back and tell people, okay, here's exactly why your TV ads aren't running or don't have the results that you're expecting in this key demographic, right? Like, I would go back and explain it. So I had the unique experience of dealing with people who had invested their entire life in becoming math geniuses and being able to translate it to forward-facing marketers, which helped me. So I took like all of those, I took a lot of the concepts, but even then, like, I don't have the skill set to be able to do a lot of that deeper learning. Like at LeadMD, we had to hire Eric to do that work for us, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is still a skill set gap in pretty much every marketer, because we don't go to school for math. Yeah.
No, a lot of marketers come from creative disciplines like graphic design, web design, things like that. I know tons of marketers that got into marketing from literature backgrounds because they're very, very good political science, because they're very good with words and crafting messages and storytelling, which is a big part of marketing. And they haven't taken math since high school. And then suddenly you give them a complex data set like marketing attribution, and you're asking them, hey, go turn this raw data into insights. I don't care what profession somebody's in, because this is certainly not a knock on marketers. Anybody that you ask to do that hasn't done that type of math since high school, if ever, is going to struggle with that. And so there is a skills gap in the marketing industry that most marketers do not have the skills, or they haven't flexed those muscles in so long that those muscles have atrophied, that it makes it very difficult to go from data to insights and then insights to action. So the more that you can automate that and put that in the hands of like machines, like math is actually very easy for machines. It really is, because it's a series of rules. So if you can put the math in the hands of the machines, that actually makes it a lot more accessible to marketers that haven't flexed those muscles in 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So I think that this is a huge step in the right direction for attribution and marketing generally, because it closes that skills gap down and it shrinks down the resources gap that allows us to actually get value out of these platforms much more reliably.
Yeah. And so my last takeaway it dovetails, as they say, directly into that point, which is marketing should be moving towards, but also back, I guess, to the classic kind of things that people think about when they think about marketing, back to being creative, back to finding these unique ways to really connect with potential buyers and customers. And I think that was another thing that I heard over and over and over again. I don't know that anyone really explained it as well as Lars did from Dream Data, where he talked about how important he feels it is to make sure that his team has a budget set aside for creative, off-the-wall ideas that they can test, put out into the market, see if they do well or they don't, and then really double down on those investments. And he explained, from what I remember, and I'd love your recollection of this too, but I think he said that when you do that first initial investment, you can't really expect to get an ROI on it. It might just fucking fail. The ROI might be zero. You might not be able to tell what the ROI is. And everyone has to be on the same page about doing these sort of creative experimental things so that you can keep the love alive in marketing, right? And then once you know if it works, you get a little bit of a leading indicator that it does, then you invest a bunch of money in it into channels that you can track. So you might do an organic social post that's off the wall, it gets some traction, then you invest in sponsoring that post in a way that you can track that back to obviously pipeline, close one revenue, all of that stuff. I thought that was fascinating to hear almost every single one of these CEOs. Again, they're CEOs of these companies saying like marketing must be creative, that we must enable the ROI conversation can't disable or hold back marketers' abilities to be creative, or the whole organization, right? Lars talks about Laura, who's a sales rep at Dream Data, and the creativity that she puts out into the marketplace and all that stuff. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just love the idea of having an R&D budget inside marketing that's just there to do crazy shit that we can think of, right? Which marketers love when they have that creativity because again, they come from creative backgrounds. They want to be creative. They got into marketing because marketing's fun, right? And then they end up in B2B marketing where it's not as fun. And then they're like, well, now you just put me in this box and you keep telling me to think outside the box, but you don't give me the budget to think outside the box, right? And so I think that Aaron said it great when he said, I think it was Aaron who said, if you're going to do the same shit that everybody else does, you're going to get the same results everybody else does. And if I want my organization to do better than my competitors, I have to do stuff they aren't doing. And that's how they came up with the Fast CMO campaign, which was fantastic. And then Dream Data coming up with putting a billboard in the middle of Times Square, even though a billboard is not measurable with their own software, because it would be fun, right? And it was almost like it was a prank to do it. Those types of things, those are fun things. They're creative, and your competitors aren't doing it. And so I think that having an R&D budget for marketing is a great way to bring creative back to marketing, fun back to marketing. Now, to your other point, though, about measurement, when you have an R&D budget in marketing, you have to expect, the expectation has to be that we are going to get $0 in provable ROI from this because we're just trying new stuff and we're getting crazy and we're getting fun. So we can't expect to get a return on any of this. And the more you set that expectation for that budget, the more people will just be okay with, well, either one, we don't have ROI, or two, it's something so creative and out of the box that there's no way to track ROI. And I've always been of the mindset that if you run a program and we all agree that there's no way to actually track ROI on this, or we're not going to bother tracking ROI on this because X, Y, or Z, it's okay to not measure it. But you have to have an intentional motion about what should and shouldn't be measured, right? So in this case, when you have an experimentation budget and R&D budget, it's as long as we are intentionally designing it in a way that like we know that we're not going to be able to track ROI on this, or our expectation is zero, then that's okay. That's totally fine because it's an intentional design.
Yeah, and I think the other part that I would encourage everyone to steal is the way that Aaron Bird explains how to get him as a CEO to say yes to crazy ideas like this, which is to compare it to investing. I have never met a CEO who does not consider themselves an investor. And I don't necessarily mean in the stock market, but they are constantly measuring investments of time, of capital, of human resources. That is how their brain thinks. And so I think kind of like the takeaway from a business case creation perspective is that when you go in and you try to make the business case for why this R&D budget is something that is going to help the company, I think you also need to talk about it as an investor and say, this is where we're going to find outpaced gains. Yes, we're doing webinars. Yes, we're doing ads. Yes, we're doing organic social. We're doing everything that our competitors are doing. But the best that we can hope for by doing all of that is exactly what they're getting. We're going to be middle of the road. I think Aaron says there, if there's 10 people in your field, doing what everyone else is going to do is going to get you middling results. You want to get the best results. You want to get the most customers. You want to have the most market share. You want to get paid the most for an exit is ultimately what your CEO cares about. And in order to get there, you need some experimentation. You need to find the things that other people aren't doing. And I was like, that's brilliant. Like every person who's fighting for budget should go listen to Aaron's interview so that you can speak like he speaks to your own CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great way of thinking about that, and it's actually it's changing my mindset a little bit as a CEO of Attributa. That I'm switching my mindset a little bit around that too, because like I need to approach things that way as well. I also think it was interesting that this was a common thread throughout these conversations about the experimentation budget. And if you look at each of the four companies that we talked to, they all are actually doing something very unique or had done something unique. Visible had their fast CMO concept, which was just super unique and creative. Dream Data has just really gone full in on LinkedIn and social selling, and they have unique stuff that comes through LinkedIn all the time. And they've got that whole motion that they kind of is unique to them. Caliber Mind has this unique new kind of positioning that they have of marketing decision engine, which is super unique and creative. And Hockey Stack has the Flow, which is like their own media company that they have, right? That is, or media entity that they have that is super unique to them. So it's interesting that not only are they saying it, but they're also living it as well. They're practicing that thing that they're saying that you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so those are the thing. I got all fired up. Yeah, I just started firing at you. What takeaways did you have that I didn't mention? Anything?
No, these were the big ones that I had. I think the only other thing that I would say that was a common thread that we haven't talked about yet is that each of these organizations is approaching attribution from a slightly different lens. Visible has that traditional, this is how to do better, mostly advertising type lens. Caliber Mind is approaching it from a decision engine standpoint to help you make better decisions. Dream Data has, again, a slightly different approach in that they are also incorporating things like account-based elements and information like that. And then Hockey Stack is like just the new kid to the group that's like, we'll do anything. They're getting really creative and really trying new approaches as well. So I think each one of them has a slightly different lens that they view attribution through, and it's what makes each of their organizations super unique.
Yeah, I just really loved all of these interviews. I thought it was great recap to understand where did this whole space begin with Aaron and all the way through to your point with Amir, the newest kids on the block, and how they're perceiving this in a very different way. It was fascinating hearing just all of these different perspectives on the space and where it's going next. And I thought you did an awesome job, Drew. It's such a cool thing that you're doing, just focusing on attribution and the mini series format. And of course, like, I'm biased because I'm helping you put it together. But I think that the mini series format that we came up with, this idea of like, let's do the history, and then in the next mini series, we're going to do in the trenches. So we're really going to start talking to people about, okay, you are an actual user of this software. We're going to talk to users of Visible and Caliber Mind. I don't know that we're going to do a user of every single one of these softwares, but we're going to talk to people who are actually on the streets doing these things, having to have the hard conversations about how do I get the budget for this, all of those sorts of things. So your vision for this Attribution Nation podcast, I don't even want to call it a community, but I know you're building a community and a group, but we want to bring more people into this conversation, learn where we've been, where we're going next, and how real people, real marketers, real data people, real all of these people are using this. So I just think it's like a dope concept, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, I built a business around attribution, and I'm passionate about marketing data and marketing analysis and trying to help marketers just do better shit. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to do is trying to help dispel a lot of the rumors and really get to what attribution really is and how it really does help people. And so it's going to be the next mini series that you talked about is going to be, in the trenches, hands in the dirt level conversations. We're even going to talk to some of the detractors, specifically some very, very vocal detractors, and have some conversations about where people are seeing success with marketing attribution and marketing data.
That's what they call a teaser in the biz. I think that's the best place to end this particular episode and the recap. Yeah.
I think so. So thank you all for listening. And Andrea, thank you for joining this episode to close out our first mini-series. For all of our listeners, like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, connect with me on LinkedIn. And while you're there, let me know if you'd like access to our private group where we keep these conversations going. And then, as we kind of teased a little bit ago, our next mini-series will be coming up May, June-ish. And it will be all about in the trenches and talking to day-to-day practitioners and how they're finding success with marketing attribution and marketing data.